moving to Asia, maybe one regret for me is that I don't speak any Asian language. So I speak, German, Spanish, French, English, like a lot of European languages, but there is, which is, useless here.
Hi everyone, I'm Helen. I'm a product manager at a late stage startup in Southeast Asia. If there was a product leaders 30 under 30, my next guest will definitely be on the list. Barely 30, she's already the head of product at Stashaway and also one of the top 65 fintech product leaders in Singapore. She's none other than Julie. Julie, she has an amazing journey and I'm very, very curious to learn from you, Julie. How did you get into product in the first place?
When I was in university, nobody knew what product management was. Is less famous as it is today. I studied mathematics, political science, then did a master in finance. And during that master, I basically worked for the innovation lab of a big French industrial group, where we were sharing the same offices with a venture capital. So I learned what venture capital was, and I was like, oh, it's amazing. It's between finance and entrepreneurship. And I started actually in venture capital for a few months in Paris, and that was my goal. I was like, in the long term, I want to be a venture capital, so I was not even thinking about product yet. But after a few months in venture capital, I decided to move on the startup side because I thought it would be interesting to see what it is on the other side. I actually had the first experience in Singapore at the time, leading the operation team for a startup called Bonito, launched by Relocating. So it was a very intense 6 months startup experience. And we were working with a product team, which was in Berlin at the time. It was quite frustrating to be on the upside and not being able to shape the product the way I wanted it to be. So I was thinking, okay, my next experience, I'm going to try product. So at the end of my studies, I had a first experience in Berlin for 6 months, where I joined like an internet startup. It was a platform to help people move. So very, web product, very analytical. At the end, I learned a lot on SQL and the basis of product management. Great experience, but in my mind, I still wanted to be a venture capital in the long term and work in VC. So I decided to start my career in investment banking in London to learn more on the financial side, still in TMT, right? Technology, media, telecom, so that I can be a venture capital in the long term. So that's why I started my career in London in investment banking. After a couple of years, I was actually missing the tech side and being closer to the product and
being an executor.
Exactly, making things that have an impact, right? Not just slide and advising the company, but actually being on the execution side.
Well, I guess it really gives you a mirage of experiences being more like the advisor side and then thereafter being an operator. So then why do you decide to kind of relocate from Europe, from France, Berlin, London to Singapore and to Southeast Asia?
So the move from London to Singapore was for a personal reason. But in terms of experience, so at the time after banking in London, I was working in a B2B company doing software for financial market participants for traders. So very technical back-end product. And we had very few clients, big corporate, large bank and institution clients, right? So I really wanted to have a more like B2C and direct to like consumer also experience.
Right.
And when I moved to Singapore, I decided to join Love Bonito, which was for me, a very different experience in fashion, e-commerce, very female-driven environment. So first of all, as a foreigner, it's not as easy, right, to get in the Singaporean market because it's quite small. So I was really looking for a lot of B2C company, and I hesitated, between a few, and Love Bonito really, really struck me because of the company culture and the values. Like it's female-funded, female-driven, and it's here to empower women, and that really, really resonated with me, right? Even if it's not fintech, it's not what I was used to, it really resonated. More of a choice from like personal preferences than a career, calculation.
So all along, you've been very interested in finance and fintech, and then going into Love Bonito was kind of a little bit of a deviation from your journey. How would you actually compare the differences in product culture in Europe as well as in Southeast Asia?
I haven't tried everywhere in Europe, and I'm sure it's very different depending on the countries.
For
but
sure.
I know in Berlin, for instance, where Rocket Internet and all this culture of all the e-commerce and the internet companies, right? It's very, very analytical, right? It's all about your KPIs, your data, and how to optimize them. So I think this model I learned in Berlin, you can explain it to a lot of places. And where I've been in Asia, so in Love Bonito, for instance, where the company was a bit more recent, and especially on the tech side, right? It wasn't as firm in terms of data and analytics yet, right? And we go so much stronger. Love Bonito has a very, very strong data team. It's very similar, right? Like at the end, we use the same processes. We the same agile processes. The difference is more in terms of maybe the interaction with your coworkers, right? Like the culture working with German people versus like Singaporean people. It's a bit different. It's not the same accent.
Okay,
it's
the
not
accent.
the same. Sometimes some things I learned also in Singapore, for instance, is that you need to maybe check a few times to make sure that what you raise doesn't, or what you're suggesting doesn't cause any issue, because they will maybe retain themselves a bit more rather than saying, oh no, this is wrong, I shouldn't do this, or compared to like Americans and Germans were a bit more straightforward. Yes. So some small things like this I learned a bit. And I also learned myself maybe to try to be a bit more patient, cut a bit less people when they speak.
How would you describe the product culture at Love Bonito?
So Love Bonito is an established company in more than 10 years around, but the tech team, right, was pretty new at the time. So it was kind of a startup inside the startup, right? We went from an outsourced tech team to internal. So everything was new. So we actually had to shape that product culture, right? We didn't have a team of product manager before. We were 2 or 3, and we extended a bit. We started to do the first agile processes. We changed the team structure a few times, trying out new things. So it was really experimental and also very hands-on. I ended up coding some HTML page myself sometimes because we didn't have capacity. I supporting marketing, really doing a lot of things that you wouldn't do in a classic product role in a bigger company.
I myself am a strong supporter of Love Bonito. I love their clothes. But I would say that is kind of like the core business, right? That you're selling apparel, you're selling fashion, selling that lifestyle. How does product come into the picture?
So product in e-commerce or D2C company like Love Bonito is really 2 things. One is the customer life cycle, right? How do you manage a customer? How do you engage a customer? And another one, on the front-end side, I was really focusing on everything front-end on the website. It's really about optimization, right? How do you help with discovery? How do you help with the information in the product and the checkout and the payment? So it's very easy to funnel the journey between like discovery, selection of product, and then checkout. And then after this is like, how do you keep your user engaged, right? How do you make them
retention and engagement?
So I learned a lot of those concepts, right? Of retention, engagement, customer life cycle, and this kind of learning can be applied to a lot of products, right? Not just e-commerce, but I can also use it in fintech, for instance.
And now you're at Stashaway. How's it like being at Stashaway, and how's the product culture like?
I think it's been a very intense journey for the past year and a half. I joined as an individual contributor, so I created my own squad to take care of the investment product. So I had part of the product, and then little by little the scope kind of expanded. Also because of mix of like business priorities, for instance. Every few months we reviewed the team structure, how things make sense, and we don't hesitate to move like resources around or like stop some projects, start some new projects. So it's very, very agile. Things I noticed even immediately when I joined is willingness to learn, right? We're all young, and on the PM side also. And there was those weekly catch-up sessions, for instance, between the PMs where we like raise some topics and we decide to learn. So like one day it can be, how do you present your roadmap to the stakeholders, right? Another day it can be how you're gonna, run like a pre-mortem project, right? Before like starting an important project. So it was really spontaneous, right? It's not like top down, you guys need to learn and do this, etc. It's more like, okay, we're a team of PMs, we want to learn, we want to develop. How can we do it in the best way?
Being the head of product at Stashaway, I'm sure you are at the forefront of driving the product culture. How do you make sure like the people who are reporting to you are also as engaged, aligned with the whole product direction?
As a head of product, we have, between the the ideas and the ideation coming from the ground, and also the kind of top-down ideas from management, and just to make sure, right, the whole company is going in the same direction, right? So I have to help in driving that high level, the big stones, right, and help allocating the project, for instance, between the squads and the resources. Make sure the product managers are creative and innovative, and also very strong on the data and the analysis. So in order to do this, one of the points at Stashaway is it's a very transparent culture. We really try to share basically when we have the strategy and roadmap, it's shared at the from the C-suite, it's shared again in different sessions with the PMs, with the product teams. So usually, for instance, every quarter we'll have a deeper session where we share about the strategy for the next 6 months, and then we rely on the objectives. But then we don't plan for 6 months ahead, right? We keep iterating every month, I would say. So we review every month, but maybe every quarter we have those deep dive session where we see, this is what we want to do over the next 6 months, this is why, this is how the market is, this is how the competitors behind, and lots of sharing, right? Try to be transparent and always try to give context before doing a new project. So the interesting part is like between me and the product manager is one thing, But then as a head of product, I also need to make sure that between the product manager and the squad, it's also aligned, right? So that because the product manager is a key role inside the squad, right? So if the product manager might know why we need to do it, they also themselves, right, need to recreate and reshare, right, this vision and this strategy and get the input from the squad and make sure that the team is aligned. So it's very interesting. Like it goes through several, layers
Different layers of
communication.
communication. How you made, like, accelerated your product career? I mean, you were promoted from lead product manager to head of product just within 10 months. That is amazing. How do you manage to accomplish that?
First of all, I'm in a small company, right? I'm not in a big, like a Google or Facebook, for instance. And when I arrived, a lot of the product manager were pretty junior. And so when I arrived with, I guess, a bit of experience and the different experience I had before, I noticed already quite a few inefficiencies, right? With squads being, pretty separated, and sometimes it means that one squad could have a lot of very high impact project and another squad a bit less high impact. But they're the same allocation. I noticed this, and then you start thinking of like, how do we take a step back and help the different product manager, right? Maybe talking in the squad, right? Speaking to each other a bit more and help with like high level strategy, etc. So I really started to, first of all, I mastered my squad and my product, right? Because I was still, product manager on my side, and I really had to make sure this is delivered. But then at the same time, I also extended my scope. Some product manager left, some product manager arrived, so I took over some PM leavings, and I, transmitted it to some other arriving, etc. So it just kind of organically built up, I would say. Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure you're very humble about it. Like you kind of attributed a lot to like systemic events that happened, but I'm sure a large part of it was also due to your talent and your effort in kind of driving the direction, the product direction at Stashaway. How then do you find the step between individual contributor to then being a product leader? Was that difficult or challenging for you? What were some of the things that you would advise other people who are also making a similar leap to look out for?
Yes, it's actually pretty challenging, and I feel I'm still learning in that journey, because first of all, it's never like black and white super clean transition, right? So it's never like from one day you're an individual PM and the other day, oh, you're a head of product. No, it's been through, like, I've been through 6 months, for instance, where I had 2 direct reports and I was also individual PM on 2 other squads myself, while we were recruiting more people. So it's really, there is this transition which is a bit difficult, where you're on one side you're still doing your own project as an individual contributor, and on the other side you're like starting to learn and coach and teach new PMs, right? And on the scope, on the domain, and how to do this. So there is this more difficult transition. I would say no, I'm more on so I don't do any more individual contributor work anymore. So I really have time since a few months, to step back and work on the strategy, and it's different, right? As an individual contributor, you shine when your product shine, when you get your KPIs are met, etc.
Yeah.
As a head of product, you're not shining if it's a product. You're shining if your product manager, works. And on the downside, if there are issues with like testing or with what your product manager does, you're also responsible for this. So you're responsible for a much broader scope of things, and you really need to learn how to coach the product manager. I loved being an individual contributor and like launching product and being very, very hands-on, and little by little you learn how to stop answering for your PM and stop joining all the meetings and really step back and coach. And this has been the most difficult. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That has been the most difficult part. Yeah, because no, it's not, and we're not in a period where we can also completely let go, right? So depending on the time, the product, the strategy, you need to allocate your resource strategically, right? Sometimes you're gonna still, deep dive and go deeper in some products. Sometimes you're gonna go work closely with another squad and try to allocate in different ways. But so letting go is a difficult part, and really, coaching, trusting, finding creative resources to explain some concepts, and I'm still, in the look for like more resources and things I can do to help with the product managers. So for instance, so I don't know if you know the Reforge classes.
It's very famous.
Yeah,
yes.
so for instance, those classes, right, we watch them collectively, every Friday as a team, and we share about this, and we try to learn about other things. So I'm really trying to develop the level and also the curiosity and willingness to learn.
And that's a really good idea. I mean, like, you learn together, but at the same time you also bond with the team as you stay back to learn and discuss about the concepts. So Julie, like, what's some advice that you would give for people who are looking to transition into product, for example, like yourself, from banking into product? or looking to kind of relocate from Europe to Southeast Asia?
Okay, two very different.
Two very
things.
different. Yeah, okay,
So,
let's tackle the first
yeah.
one. Yeah.
Let's start with the product part. So, I guess for me, from banking to product is I probably don't have the classic because I
Path,
technically
yeah.
started in product, then banking, then back
Then
to
back to
product. But during those few months, it was still very challenging for me because I was in banking for 1-2 years M&A, and then the product I did was not a very like customer facing e-commerce kind of product or website. It was literally like a back-end trading API, right? So super different, and I remember actually we had a lot of different squads, and I remember for 6 months, for instance, joining all the stand-ups, all the squads, and listening to the dev speaking. And the first weeks you don't understand half of the concept they're mentioning because it's very technical. I'm not from a technical background. I've done a bit of coding, etc. But grasping the like Kubernetes, microservices, everything was new. So basically, I try to join as many of those technical discussions as I could to try to understand, right? Then I was also watching, I don't know, Kubernetes videos and things like this, try to teach by myself. People ask me sometimes if I did any class or anything, except maybe those, the before one, more the product side, on the technical side, I learned more, and same as actually a developer, that's like just watching a lot of, videos and also asking. So if I was on a stand-up and they're really like mentioning a lot of concept, and there's this concept I can't grasp, and I'm trying to understand, where does it fit in the infrastructure? I sit down with the developer and I ask them to explain it clearly. The only thing is like you don't want to be asking 5 times the same question, but if you ask it once and then you try to create your own visual representation on how things work, then it's gonna be easier. But it's not. Yeah, it's just a lot of trying to project your own representation.
So not being afraid to ask your colleagues, the developers, and then coming up with your own interpretation, coming up with your own flow, your own understanding, and then checking back again with those people that you asked on whether your understanding was correct. A sure great way to learn and accelerate your learning. And what about the second part about the relocation from kind of Europe to Southeast Asia?
So I've been, traveling quite a bit. So I've been like in Paris, right? Studied in Paris, and I did 1 year in the US. Then I went back to Paris. Then I went to Singapore, then Paris, then Berlin, then London, then Singapore. So for me, it was just one more move. I would say moving to Singapore is pretty easy because it's a very easy city to live in, and even in terms of administrative paperwork, very easy compared to like some of the other regions I've been in. Maybe on the cultural side, I guess for me the food was different as a very French person. Like I had to discover all the food, the spices, like see what I could.
Are you getting more used to the food right now?
Yes, I'm still a very, very mild kind of spicy person, but I've progressed. I know when I go in a food court, I know what I like.
Right.
It's very, very easy. I actually love.
What's your favorite dish?
I love xiaolong pao.
Oh, xiaolong pao. Yeah. That's not spicy at all.
No. That's why So the food was different. Relocating Asia or not Asia is also being ready to rebuild all your relationships, your connection, right? You arrive in a city and you don't know anyone, and so you really need to be open to meet people. And I think Singapore is a great city for this because you have a lot of people in and out.
Very international.
Yeah, very international. Yeah, sometimes it feels a bit lonely, right? When you're like far, like I don't know, 15, 16 hours away from your family, and so that's things you need to to be ready to face. Moving to Asia, maybe one regret for me is that I don't speak any Asian language. I speak, German, Spanish, French, English, like a lot of European languages, but which is, useless here. So this is maybe one regret. It's not mandatory. You can work.
You can get by very well with English.
Yes. But I think if you master one of the local languages or the regional languages, it's also very nice to have, and probably easier for you to find some opportunities. Like I know a lot of tech companies, for instance, have like dev team like in China where you need to speak like Chinese, etc. So it's like,
that's true.
Maybe one.
Stashaway, is it the tech team is in Singapore?
So a bit. So mostly in Singapore and Malaysia, and then we have a bit of developers also in some other regions. Like in Canada and Europe.
Okay. Then that's very okay. Like you can still get by with English, no problem.
Yeah.
Super thankful to Julie for sharing your valuable insight. We also have another part 2 to this video where we will talk a bit more about Julie's career journey as a female product leader at also a very young age. Stay tuned to the next video. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you.
And see you next week. Bye.
Bye.